Okay, so it is about 8:40 on Monday. I have yet to have employment, but I have an interview today, and it's for a very small warehouse, 1,500 square feet. That's roughly twice the size of my apartment. It's nothing for a size, and I know that I've been looking for a very small scale warehouse. So, more family oriented, run by the same people since 1985. If I can get that, great. Uh, and it's in an industry that I know, so all the better. Fuck pharmaceuticals. I'll never work in that industry again. And that company that I work for can kiss my ass. So, that being said, my topic for now is on species of fish and their relative fighting power for their size and weight, physical characteristics. I promised that I would do this before in a previous video when I briefly gave an explanation on why bass, as far as fighting fish, were my favorite. Now, for me, I gotta make an addendum to that from the first video. For me, it's kind of a toss-up between bluegill and bass. They're in the same family of fish. Bass are actually a form of sunfish, believe it or not. They're in that genus of fish species. Bluegill are feisty little bastards, and I've got them as large as 2 pounds. Now, let me tell you something. Bluegill are a very densely muscled fish. They're more densely muscled than bass. And I've said this before, but it's been theorized by marine biologists that if a bluegill was the size of a tuna, it could pull an average sport fishing offshore boat and sink it, basically. That's massive. But their ounce for ounce power is more powerful than a tuna's for its size. I mean, it's ridiculous. Excuse me. So, the reason to me that bass are more sporting than even, say, muskellunge, pike, those type of freshwater fish. And I'm talking right now freshwater specifically. Because in the ocean, there's some fish that are way beyond the fighting power relative to size than bass. But the reason that bass are my favorite sport fish, they're like opportunistic garbage cans. They'll eat any fucking thing if they have the opportunity to eat it. Relative to size, they will eat things, or try to, as big as themselves. They try to get a meal that's going to last them a while. It's a purely instinctual thing on their level. It's ridiculous. The thing with them is, if you have the lowdown, so to speak, on what they eat in their own environment, and you imitate that, or you catch that version, that live version of the same thing, you're going to get bass. Doesn't matter what time of year it is, doesn't matter how deep it's going to be, it's going to happen. And they're one of those fish that's one of the few fish that it's like that all year long. If you find the representation or the natural version of it, you're going to catch them. Bluegill don't do that. Crappie don't do that. Walleye don't do that. Smallmouth bass do, because they're another type of bass. Catfish, yeah, they're kind of overall opportunistic. But they have attitudes sometimes. And they change what their temperament is for what they're going to eat. They'll still eat their natural bait, but there's times where they'll scoff at it. And bass don't have that issue. Carp feed off the bottom. They're more of opportunistic. If it's in front of them and they're eating it, then that's what's going to happen. If they happen to smell it and it's attractive, they'll come and look at it and eat it. So they're pure opportunists, where a bass is an opportunist on anything, but given the choice, what they naturally eat is what's going to happen lure-wise or naturally from you as an angler to get success with a bass. I love this about them. And they're more willing to strike something than, say, a muskellunge. Muskie are a badass fish. I've caught a couple of them. They're a ridiculous fighting fish. But once they get to a point where they know they've been had, they can give up. They can be like, fuck it, I'm done fighting. And then all of a sudden the fight's over. Unless you're at the boat and they get a sudden burst. Again, of energy, sometimes they'll run again. But they're not like bass. Bass, until the moment you lift those bastards, are defiant little motherfuckers. They don't give a fuck. They're like the Mike Tysons of the water. They will punch you the fuck out. And despite the fact that something as small as a bluegill has more density and power to size, the bass has more of a fighting attitude. And some of the things that help it with this is that they're very, for their density and their width and height and everything combined, they're actually a very streamlined fish. So it's easy for them to glide through the water. And the tail that they have, when it fans out, they fan them. They change, all fish do. They change the angles and everything else of their fins. Well, when bass do it, it gets really wide. They throw that tail, and they're just gangbustering it. Big time. And at that point, their other fins on the back and underneath, they're more for stability and support in their movement. They're not so much used for direction as the tail is of the bass. It's a little bit different than most fish. They direct themselves really well with their tail, and it's only enhanced by the other surfaces that they have to turn with. So their fight is much different than other freshwater fish. Catfish is different. Catfish has this massive tail. I mean, it's fucking huge to the rest of their body. Their other fins are relatively small compared. And what they do is they turn their head and they try to bury down or move away, and that's what makes that fight with catfish legendary for. Where with a bass, it's because of their tail again, but it's also because they just don't let up. They don't ever let up. I've never had one, and I've caught tens of thousands of bass. I've never had one stop until the moment I left it, and even then they tried to rip my fucking thumb off. That's what makes them a prime apex predator quarry for me to go and search out. Now, I prefer natural bait to lures, which you really wouldn't think of it because they have like $200-300 swim bait setups and a buttload of swim baits. So, I mean, I'm lying to myself to a point. I like using those, but I've been doing so good on live bait that I've been using live bait more. And to that end, I've actually gone through 2 of the Betts 4-foot cast nets. Here in Arizona, we're only allowed a maximum of a 4-foot unless it's on a private pond or lake and you're given permission or it's yours, or it's a property like an HOA where it's not posted. Those are only a couple of exceptions. Other than that, it has to be a 4-foot max. They don't regulate anything else besides that. Your hand line can be as long as you want it to be. You could crimp 2 hand lines together. They won't care about that. It's the actual standing length of the net. So, I had the Tyzac Betts. Had 3/4 pound weights, 3 8-inch spacing. Glided down the water, fairly medium speed. Caught pretty decent bait, but it got snagged on every fucking thing. The monofilament that they use is kind of less expensive than you would expect for a net that's costing you $30, but it works. I did lots of reviewing online first before I decided on that one. It lasted for quite a while. I finally bit the bullet in a really big fight with a shoreline structure, the concrete in Scottsdale at the Vista del Camino pond, it just got shredded, and I threw it right in the trash can. I was so pissed off because when they do these ponds, they just don't think about anglers. They don't give a fuck when they design them. I mean, there's other states where they do think all about the angler when they're designing a pond, but these ones, Scottsdale especially, they didn't give a fuck. It was a pretty thing for people to go outdoors and enjoy. Chaparral's okay, but they still didn't really think about the angler. So that one got destroyed, and I went and I got another Betts from Bass Pro. Bass Pro's like 5 minutes from my apartment. I'm kind of lucky. So I got another Betts. I got an Old Salt. Old Salt is what's considered the golden standard for the economy model nets. It's a bit better than the Tyzac. It had 1 pound weights instead of 3/4. Another 3/8 spacing. I realized that it has a tendency to gill a lot of the smaller, like 2 to 3 inch shad. I end up having to pull them out of the net. But I was willing to do that. That one lasted me for quite a while. It ended up getting shredded really bad on one of the points, one of the ponds that I go to. And I ended up having to sew for like 4 hours with my own monofilament and all the little holes. I spent literally like 5-6 hours one night fixing this net. And the next day I ripped it again. But I kept using it, and it kept catching fish. So kudos to Betts for making some strong nets. But it wasn't my cup of tea. I was really good at throwing them, comfortable with the type of ring that they had at the top. Didn't like the fact that there was 2 separate rings. I finally on eBay ordered a 1/4 inch spaced Joy fish from Lee Fisher. Has 1 1/4 pound round lead weights. Significant because the shape of the weight does control how deep and fast they go at the same time. So for the 1 1/4 pound weights with the round lead, it sinks fairly quick for the spacing of the netting. But this is what I discovered and why I wanted to go to 1/4 inch. I don't have to hit the bottom and risk catching things because I can not get to the bottom. And keep in mind, when a net comes down, it starts flattening and it starts doing this. And at the end, when you pull, it's when it picks the bass up and it traps the bait, basically. You can get them to go all the way on the bottom, but then they sit there and they're coned. So when you pull up, you're going to lose bait. I try to do it before it hits the bottom nowadays because of that. Because they never lie completely flat. They just don't. I used it on the pond for the first time yesterday. And I got to tell you, I got everything from these little 1/2 inch glass minnows all the way up to like 5 inch shad. It was beautiful how this net worked. And the heaviness tires your arms out after a while, even when you use your body, but you accept it because of how good it works. I mean, it really is awesome. So, it's one of the reasons, getting off of the track a little bit, it's one of the reasons that I try to use live bait when I can, because it's exactly what they eat. Multiple species eat that bait. In the pond that I go to regularly, there's Rio Grande cichlids, there's big bluegill, there's red ear, sunfishes, channel catfish, flathead cat, bullheads, a lot of bass. I have seen as big as 14 pounds come out of this pond. And a couple of people that I know that do watch my YouTube, they know this pond too. The potential, I think the next state record is going to come out of this damn pond. But it's not going to be accepted because it's a pond that's not part of the community program. So I don't think that Game and Fish will accept it. I could be wrong. It's possible. But I mean, I've only been fishing this pond for like 7-8 months. And I've seen multiple 10-pound bass come out of there. I've pulled an 11.5 something pound bass out of there. So it's just, the ecosystem in that lake is phenomenal. And like I said, bass are this like apex predator that just, they're violent and voracious. Excuse me, Simba moment. Simba. Had to wipe my screen. So there's just this vicious, opportunistic, malicious, mean, instinctually eating, breeding machine. They're insane compared to other freshwater game fish, and they just have this attitude that's unlike any other freshwater game fish. Even the big flatheads and blue cats don't have that voraciousness. They will take natural bait and they'll put up a good fight, but they're not voracious like that. And this is why I love bass the most out of all the fish I catch. Now, don't get me wrong. I have a 7'2" Ron Weber Southwest Custom Rods ultralight that I got made by Ron specifically for panfish only. But it handles all the way through the big fish as long as I fight them the right way with my drag. But it's a blast with panfish. And panfish are fun too, don't get me wrong. I love all fish. But bass is where it's at for me. And I know some people are like, oh, catfish this, so carp that. They compartmentalize themselves. I fish for all fish at the same time, but my preference in what I go for is my intention is to catch a big bass. And I go prepared for that. So catching the bait is in my best interest. Now, the first time I ever cast a net in this pond was with my Tyzak, the first net, and I was pulling out 5 to 9 inch gizzards, and there's gizzard and threadfin in there. There's pike minnows in there. There's glass minnows in there. There's one that's got a black back and silver side. There's all these different types of bayfish, and they eat them all. The tilapia and the bluegill young alone are in the tens of thousands. The ecosystem is freaky in this pond. I've never seen another pond in the valley or anywhere I fished ever be like this. But it's a good thing because it just propagates the life in this water. So that's more of a perspective on density to the size. With different fish, it matters what type of top bottom fins they have to their tail. One of the reasons that bluegill have the fight that they do is because they're roughly like this round dinner plate kind of shape, and they have these fins that come out and they turn sideways in the water. And when they do that, it's like moving a brick wall, and then they move backwards. So ounce for ounce, they really are the strongest. Barracudas in saltwater. Now I'm talking saltwater. Barracudas in saltwater, they're vicious, man. They put up a fight. Amberjacks, but it has to do with their density to their fin size and how they move in the water. It's all a combination of things. But again, this is why I like bass the most. They just have this thing about them with their fight. They're like UK football fans, if I could put it in a certain perspective. It's ridiculous how they are. And that's why I like them. So I would invite you as a fisherman, if you want to know more about the forage that you go for and what to use, and that's for the sport fish you're choosing to go for, we have a wonderful tool online now. The internet has lots of information that people put up for this. I'm no exception to that rule. There's tons of information, specifically scientifically, on the physicalities, the physiologies of marine animals in general, and all the fish. Yeah, so I would invite you to study that stuff, learn. I do it all the time. But being a redneck fisherman, I don't put those specifics on my videos. I do it in layman's terms more. It's easier for me as an autistic individual, no matter the fact that my IQ is quite high. It's just easier for me to explain it in simple terms that a fisherman would just go, oh, I know what he means. Study. Find out what the forage is in your lake. Get a cast net just to see what's in the lake. That's the beginning reason that I did get a cast net, was so that I could cast out and see what type of fish were in there for bait fish. Now, the added benefit of that was to see what kind of other fish were in there, because as they're chasing them, they get a tendency to be caught in a cast net. Ha! Now, I've found that on the pond that I go to, the bass will chase them all the way up to the shoreline, because I'll cast 3 or 4 foot out, and I'll have smaller bass with the shad. So do these things. Get a cast net just to see what's going on in your water. Ask the local game and fish what type of structure a given body of water has. They can tell you that. Well, if they have that information, they can. HOAs are a little bit different. They design their ponds when they build communities. They may or may not have the information. They may. But if you tell an HOA, then they know you're fishing their HOA. And unless you're part of the membership, they kind of frown on that. But I've asked anyway. Golf courses, find out if you can fish them after hours, because some of them will let you. But talk to the greenskeepers. They're the go-to people to know whether they'll allow you, because the people that manage golf courses, they'll never say yes. The greenskeepers are a different story. They're the ones in charge of the greens. So there's these little things. But pound for pound, my favorite is always going to be a largemouth bass. Smallmouth are more powerful. I just like the way that the largemouth are voracious, the way that they are. Smallmouth are a little more picky, so I'm not as big a fan of a smallmouth as I am a largemouth. But that's my take on size versus, physiology and how they fight, and why I love the largemouth bass the most out of them all.